Hello, I am Moodida, and welcome back to Satisfactory. This is my 1.0 playthrough, where I attempt to load balance all my factories, because for some reason, this is what I call fun. In the last video, I added the next floor to the large electronics factory in the Grassy Fields. This is creating all the circuit boards through supercomputers I need for my final factories. Or so I thought. I'll get into that later. The main goal for today is to start a new factory in the Rocky Desert. I'm not going to grab every single node like I did in the Dune Desert, but I will be utilizing a whole lot of them. The first stage of this factory is going to be making a few nuclear pasta, just 20 per minute. That's not that many, right? And here we are in the Rocky Desert. It's so empty. There's pretty much nothing out here right now, except for right on the very edge, I'm using some of the coal. Other than that, this is pretty much an untapped biome. I've got just pretty much everything to work with. So thankfully, I've already got a train line running there, so getting power over here is going to be pretty easy. But I'm thinking I'm probably just going to use this whole huge area right here. And as much as I try not to, I am probably just going to be using fly mode, because it just makes everything so much easier. And I think it'll probably give you a little bit steadier of a camera to view at instead of me jumping around with the jump pack. See, I'm doing it for you, not because I want to cheat and just use fly. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. So yeah, I think basically this huge area that's open and more or less flat, I am just going to take over. That is one of the great things about the desert, is you have this huge open area where there's pretty much just nothing right in the middle. All the nodes are more or less out here on the edges, then there's a ton up here in the rocks over there, and then we get to some more over here. Let me get to work and lay down the outline of what this is going to be. And it's a pretty big outline. So, let me show you. This is, if we get close enough, a 6x6 blueprint, and there should be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 10 of them. Let's see, so that would be 60, plus you add on another 6 on each side, so this is a 72 by 72. And the reason it's this tall is so that I could avoid this, which looks super weird when I just get out of range, but there we go. So it just goes on top of that. I could have scooted this over a little bit more this way and possibly missed it, but then dealing with it just on the outside, depending on how I want to do the walls and whatnot, would probably make it look even worse. So I decided to just cover it. And it gives me plenty of space to do any extra logistics and, you know, maybe hide a train station or two in there. But I have a plan for it. This isn't going to be just completely empty. I'm actually going to use a good portion of that space. Alright, so like I mentioned, today's plan is the nuclear pasta. I'm not sure if I'll add a flowchart because this one is kind of all over the place because I'm making so many of them. I'm kind of making the copper powder in a few different places. Some of you may remember I'm making about 800 copper powder in the Grassy Fields factory, so that takes care of some of it, but definitely not all of it. Pressure conversion cubes, thankfully, are super easy for me because I've already made a whole bunch of fused modular frames. Radio control units, well, I thought I had enough. Spoiler. That's going to take up a portion of this video. We'll get back to that later. But in general, pressure conversion cubes, really easy to make. Just an assembler. I've already got these parts made. Easy peasy. So then it's just the copper powder, which is really easy. All you need is copper ingots and a constructor, and you can make the copper powder. The hard part is the scale, seeing as you need 30 copper ingots to get 5 copper powder. So 6-to-1 ratio is not great. So let's look at the blueprint I came up with. And let's make it daytime. This is using the Mark III blueprinter because I needed the full height of it so that I could squeeze in the particle accelerator. And the process starts right down here. So I've got 3 foundries. Each of these foundries are overclocked to 200%, so they're going to intake 100 copper and 100 iron ore and produce 200 copper ingots. So a set of 3 of these will intake 300 of each and produce 600 copper ingots. Those copper ingots get grouped together and head right into this constructor, which is going to be overclocked to the same 200% so that it can intake 600 copper ingots and it'll produce 100 copper powder. That 100 copper powder just comes right up here and plugs into the particle accelerator, until I have a massive amount of power, I am just going to leave the particle accelerators clocked to 100%, because where it would be nice to have less of them, that extra power does kind of add up when you're dealing with these kind of amounts. So these are going to be clocked to 100%, which means I need 0.5 pressure conversion cubes. So to get those, that's what this one is doing right here. This assembler is just going to be clocked to 50%, but it'll only produce 0.5 per minute. And this is how I'm going to create all that nuclear pasta. I just need a whole bunch of copper and iron ore, and then I'll be bringing in the fuse modular frames and the radio control units by drone. And so I'll just need to do a whole bunch of load balancing across all the assemblers. But that can't be that bad, right? The entire reason the factory is shaped like this is because I came up with this idea. I need 40 particle accelerators since they're clocked to 100%. And so I thought having this where each one had its own window and I could put 10 on each of the sides of a square would be a cool look. And that is the entire reason this factory is going to look like this. That one silly idea. Well, let's lay down a few so you can see what it looks like. And just as a quick reminder, because I'm horrible at reading all of the little options down here at the bottom of the screen, but right in the bottom corner, you hit T, you can hide everything. And a great part about this is because it's a 6x6 blueprint, it snaps to the bottom one. Now, unfortunately, because of beams or I don't know what reason, it snaps like 1 meter off, 2 meters. So I just got to nudge it forward, those two. And now I can place it. And now I can snap it to the one next to it and it'll be in the right location. And I can place about half a row before I run out of materials. So it's actually quick wire that is the one that refills the slowest for me right now. So I guess it's finally time to add a couple more dimensional depots to that because I need a few more of these. It'll probably be quicker just to run back and do that. But the other thing I like to do when you're building a huge project like this and you're just going to have to wait, it's usually not long, but you know, if you just give it 2 or 3 minutes, pretty much everything in your dimensional depot will refill. You can place a couple more and then rinse and repeat. What I like to do in the meantime is work on my next blueprint that I'm going to be using. And for that, I want to figure out what walls I want to use. So in between playing with them, I'll just place down another blueprint or two, and then I'll go back to kind of working on what I was doing. And you can kind of work your way through the project pretty quickly through that, and you don't have to just sit around and wait. Just start working on the next thing. This is what I've been working on. I really like the half foundations because unlike the full foundations, which give you just kind of the normal concrete look on the sides, you get one side that has the asphalt coloring and then the other side that still looks like the concrete. So it just gives you some more options. I went with a bunch of the half foundations and then I used some ramps up here with some beams. And then with this, I used the coated concrete using the copper finish and then some more beams to kind of give it some more depth and a little bit more color. And the idea with this is half and then I'm going to have a mirrored half. And with 2 halves, I can put them together like this. So here's the left side like I was showing, and then here's the mirrored half for the right side. And then that way, these little kind of pillar things don't show up too often, and there's, I think, 5 of them per side, and there's 10 windows for the 10 different particle accelerators, and I think it looks pretty good. And then even though it's kind of hard to see, you'll still be able to see all the load balancing that's going on from the outside here. On this side is going to be all the load balancing for the assemblers. And then on this side is where I'll do any of the belt work for the iron and the copper. And then those 4 foundations right there are the dead center of this whole thing. Sometimes that's useful to know. But that's what it looks like with 40 particle accelerators in place. Not too shabby. So my big square is coming along pretty well so far. And the nice thing with this is I was able to just load up these blueprints and then just chop off most of it. And then that way I could make this continued piece, and then I just gotta lock it in place and then nudge it into the right place, and then I can basically just continue this piece all the way down. And then since it's not too tall, that way I can just clip part of it into the ground and I just don't have to worry about it. And that's how I'll bring down the 4 sides. How I'm gonna close off the corners, I honestly just haven't figured that out yet. And I probably won't until I do the next stage of this factory. So for now, they're probably just going to stay open, but it makes working on the factory a whole lot easier that way too. And so this is the next step for me. I'm going to kind of go around and finish off the walls. I'd like to just kind of get that out of the way now. It gives me something to kind of work with because the next step is going to be working on the buses. And with these ones, I want to do something a little bit different. So it's going to be similar, but I want to spice things up a little bit and make this biome just a little bit different than the other ones. So we'll start off with the same housing that I use pretty much everywhere. But getting it from here to the factory is what I want to change up. In the past, what I would do in this situation would be probably to move this up to, say, here. And then what you do is you grab the foundation, and then you zoop it over. You lay down your belt. And that's the key part. You need to do the belt first. And then you can grab the big or the small. I just like the big frame pillar. It just gives you a lot more wiggle room in case the items on the belt are kind of big, and just a little bit more flexibility in my opinion. Once it's here, you know, if I highlight this, even if I try to aim through the gap, I'm not going to target the belt. It's only going to target the big frame pillar. So lay down the belt first if you want to do something like this. It just makes things a lot easier. And then I go back and I delete this. And that's pretty much how I run a lot of the belt buses. Or if there's a number of them, then I use some of my other blueprints that are a little bit bigger. They can handle multiple belts. But with this area, I want to do things a little bit differently. I think with this one, I want to try to keep things basically as low to the ground as possible. So I'm just going to run all my buses just right on the ground. Get rid of these rocks. And then I'm going to line them with just a 1 meter wall. So nothing too crazy, but just enough to give it that, you know, a little extra on the side, but not use like railings or the barriers or anything like that. And let's make them stand out a little bit. And I think copper will be kind of the theme with this factory. So might as well just color all these. And you know what? I think asphalt would look much better. Give it a real nice clean look. And then we'll just have the belts run right along here. And I think that'll give it a good look. I might even add, just to kind of smooth things out, because this always looks a little bit weird, in my opinion. So I think I may just add a concrete wall right underneath. Just so that it's all smooth instead of having that kind of lip. So I'll probably play around with it a little bit, but I think this is how I want to do all the belt buses in this area instead of doing my normal blueprints. Just to switch things up. Well, I definitely need some radar tower coverage, so I'm going to work on that, and then I'll be able to more easily show you. So I'm not going to grab every node. However, I am going to grab every copper node and some of the other ones. I'm going to be using a lot of iron, a lot of copper, and I'm going to be planning a little bit ahead for the next part of the factory, so I'll be grabbing a bunch of limestone and the remaining coal and that sort of a thing. Just not every single node. Okay, so I thought this was interesting, and in case you're working in this area and looking for this node, I thought I'd point it out. I am grabbing some limestone nodes right here, so I've got a pure node, so we can clock that to 1200. And if I look at my map, I did add a radar tower over here. Just use the geothermal to power it. There's another limestone node, and it's pure, so I kind of want to grab it. However, I don't see it. Do you? Yeah, I was looking all over for it, and then if, you know, you just look at the map, you zoom in, and okay, I should be right on top of it. Doesn't even say I can mine it. But yep, sure enough, there's a node there. And it's pure. Whatever, it really doesn't matter since I'm going to cover in concrete anyways. Let me show you what I've been working on. So this is the one that I showed you. So just kind of polished it up a little bit. And this is how I'm bringing them in. So just kind of delete a section of the wall and then just kind of use whatever sections to plug the hole. And that way I can use the conveyor wall holes. And then I just added some stairs, and then I'm just using some ramp walls to kind of cover them on the sides. So I went with that one, and then with this one, I needed a ramp. So this is how I'm dealing with the ramps. So I just kind of alternate the inverted and the regular ramp wall. So that way it kind of keeps that theme of having the barrier on top. The only difference is I'm not going to be able to keep it to being just 1 meter tall. With the ramps, you're just going to have to mirror whatever grade that you're using for the actual foundations for the ramps too, or else, well, I don't know how else to make that work. And then I just use like a 1 meter to kind of merge the gap when you kind of go from the top or the bottom. I think it works pretty well. And yeah, so that's that one going into there. And then we get into where the bulk of them are. So the nice thing with building this the way that I'm doing right now is I really don't need to fill in the rest of it since I'm going to be using walls. Because the way this will work is I'll place just a 1 meter concrete wall right here. And then it's a 1 meter inverted fix-it wall so I can get those copper colored. And then a 1 meter ramp wall on top of that. And then to fill in the rest, I just take the normal basic concrete wall and just zoop it all the way down. Maybe do it a little bit better there. So it looks funny now with just the ramps, but eventually it'll be much cleaner. But the thing is, this is basically what it looks like right now. I got them all grouped together and I thought it would be the most efficient just to use one foundation and get them stacked. But I'll be honest, I don't know. I just don't really like the look. It's efficient. I don't have to use nearly as many foundations this way, and stacking them is pretty easy. But I just don't really like the look. So this is grabbing those 2 limestone from way out there, and then all of the coal nodes here, and then another limestone, and then 2 iron nodes right here, and then this limestone. So a whole bunch of the nodes are all getting grouped together. But I'm not crazy about it being stacked 3 high. The other thing about it is until 1.1 where I get wall holes that I can just place anywhere. Oh, I can't wait. I would just kind of have to create a big hole, or I would have to use 3 foundations so that I could have 3 rows of this. And then that's going to look funny getting them to plug into there. So I don't really want to do that. So what I think I'm going to do is just delete these next 2. And then I'm just going to go sideways. So I think I'm just going to expand this sideways and make this wider, and so that I can have all of the belts be flat. So I am going to go back and redo a whole bunch of this. And you know what? I think I made the right call. I think this looks much cooler. Alright, so I know I've showed this before, but here is the tricky part with doing belts and ramps. So you'll notice whether you have it in default or straight is much worse when dealing with ramps in my opinion. So you do that, you still get this little kind of change, right? Because this is going to always be straight up and down. It's not going to angle at the same angle as the ramp. That would just be too nice. So to get rid of that, because you end up with this sort of looking thing, let's just remove this completely. Grab a merger or a splitter, really doesn't matter which one. And what you want to do is find the spot before it starts the bend. So somewhere right about here. And then make sure it's snapping onto the belt and not the foundation, right? So you want it on the belt, place it here. Now what that does is it splits the belt right in half, right in the middle of that merger. So now I can delete this and this, and we'll go ahead and delete this. Now I'm going to go ahead and drag this all the way out to here. And now you see, I've got a nice straight belt right here. And now I just have to do that again. So it does make this straighter, but it's still going to have that little bit of a change. So I'm just going to do it again. Cut off the very end. And now I can go the rest of the way. It's a little bit more work, but if you care about how the belts look on ramps, that is the best way to deal with it that I know of. I just need to do that for the other 7 belts there. And then I've got to create a few more belt buses. So I'm going to create one that grabs that limestone and it'll head down here, grab these 2 iron nodes, and then head into the factory. And then let's take a look at the other ones. Over here we've got a couple. There's a limestone there, and then there's a copper if we zoom in way back there, but I need all the copper I can get. And then there's a couple more nodes. They're just hidden, but we'll get to that later. We're going to grab those 2. And then lastly, there's a few more nodes right over here. I think there's a copper and iron and some coal that we're going to grab. And those are going to be the ones that go the farthest. So that is going to be a bit of a journey of a bus, but I don't think it'll be too bad. I'm sure some of you recognize this, but this is the cave. If you've ever started in the Rocky Desert and then pinged for quartz and thought like, oh, I'll just run over there and go grab it, and then you realize that it's in a cave and the cave entrances are all the way over here, or all the way over here, or I think somewhere up here? I think there's a third one up here. Anyways, these 3 quartz and 1 SAM are just not the easiest to get to. But there's a lot of them, and they're kind of the more rare nodes, so I'm definitely going to grab them. So we've got a pure node, let's see, a pure node, normal SAM, and then 1 more normal quartz. So I'm going to gather these 3 up. I'm not going to dress this place up too much. I'm just going to do the same thing and just kind of border everything with just the 1 meter walls and that sort of a thing. So nothing too crazy down here. But this right here is how I'm going to get him out. And you may be wondering, what in the world do I have this here for? And that's the reason right there. So I completely understand what I'm about to do next is just not for you and you just don't like it. I completely get it. But let me show you what I have in mind. So this is a pretty good distance. But if we go from the bottom up to the floor hole, I can go that whole distance. And this is really just to test it out. This isn't where this would go, and I need some better belts than this anyways. So now if I come up here and I grab the lift and I click it in place, now if I go all the way out, well, let me show you what happens. And here we are, right above that spot, and now this is actually really close to the surface already. The distance between here and the top of the cave is actually pretty small. As you can see, I can lift the lift way high. But all I really want is for it to just go up just barely. So that's plenty. So that is the way I'm going to get all of those resources out of here. Instead of having them go all the way out to either of the sides and then get bust all the way in, I'm just going to cheat. And this is thanks to a comment in the very beginning of the series. So I'm sorry if I can't find it and link it on the screen. But when I was grabbing the SAM from the cave that's all the way over there, probably easier to show you on the map. Wow, I don't have tower coverage over there. But anyways, there's SAM in a cave that's underneath over here. But unfortunately, where the cave is was pretty much under just a whole bunch of this mountain. And so going straight up through the ceiling, just I couldn't find a good place to do it over there. But right here is just like the perfect spot. I can just skip going so far in either of the directions. Yes, it is going to be clipping, but my plan is to just cover all of that part. Because in my mind, there's no reason I wouldn't be able to dig a hole through here. And so that's the story I'm going with. But like I said, I completely understand if you think that's too much clipping. If I wasn't going to just completely hide all of the clipping, I wouldn't go with this either. But I thought it was a really cool idea, and I just had to try it out. And with all 4 of them, now it looks something like this. So we've got the 2 pure quartz nodes, and then the 1 normal quartz and 1 normal SAM. And then grabbing those 2 other nodes, they're just kind of getting snaked along there. And then these come down to here, where that copper node, because it's only a normal, is getting joined up with this copper node. Just raise it up 1 level, so it's that high, basically. Because when you have all the belts right next to each other, this just, I'm not going to deal with that much clipping. I'll hide the clipping in the rocks, but, you know, that I can't deal with. So that's basically what I did, just create the short little lifts so that way I could merge up a 600 and a 600, and so now I have a 1200 line that goes off into the factory. And another beautiful belt bus. And then these 3 lines are the ones that are coming from all the way over there. So the coal, the iron, and the copper. So that is, I think, most of the belt buses done. Oh yeah, and then these ones over here I almost forgot about. Thankfully, this one just seemed super short and easy compared to the rest of them. So only 1 little short ramp here that I needed for this iron node, but then grabbing some more copper and some more iron, and then those are all just headed on into the factory. Still need to dress them up with the walls and everything, but I am putting that off for just a little bit longer. I'm not sure who I saw do this first, but I've seen a number of people do it, and I just think it's always such a cool look. This is just using the basic walls to create kind of like a grading system, so it looks like the water can still pass through here just fine. And you basically just use the nudge to place them. So each one of these are 1 meter spaced apart. Well, this is a lot of resources, and unfortunately, it is not enough. There is just not nearly enough copper here, and if you're wondering why I didn't grab this one, it's an impure, and since it's the only impure, it doesn't really do me a whole lot of good. I'm working with amounts of full pure belts, so an extra 300, I can pretty much just leave it there. So I'm going to grab the 2 pure nodes over here, and that will be almost enough, but that's my next step. But for those, that would be pretty far for a bus, so I'm going to use a train. And I think what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to have it just come out somewhere like right around here. And then that way it can kind of come out through here. And then I'm going to try to keep it somewhat low to the ground, because this is just going to be a single track, just a push pull. I just need to grab those 2 copper nodes, and that's all this train is going to do. So we'll just have it come out somewhere around here. And then just on the inside here, I can put the train station. Alright, so it still needs the actual train tracks and supports. But this is basically what I was thinking. So not too high off the ground, but still elevated to just kind of make things easier for myself. Because I'm going to head right on over here and jump over these train tracks. This right here is grabbing sulfur and coal that's heading off into my rocket fuel power plant. So we definitely don't want to interfere with that, but gave myself plenty of clearance, so no issues with the trains there. And it's just going to head off here into the northern forest. And I've made it to here. Although I think this might be farther than I actually wanted to go. I think the train station's actually going to have to come out a bit this far. So I think I'm going to have to delete part of this. I got kind of carried away and just brought the train tracks basically to the nodes. But now I kind of need to build the train station. So thankfully we've got 2 pure copper nodes. So that's 2,400 copper ore. But that is still a decent amount of ore, especially since it only stacks to 100. So even though going from here to that factory really isn't too far, I think it's far enough that I'll need 2 freight cars per node. But still, that's a pretty short train. I only need 4 freight cars total. And I've got a little train station. So I left a little bit of extra room because there are a couple iron nodes right here. So in the future, I may need those. Honestly, I'm not sure. But just in case, I figured I'd leave enough room to easily expand it if I need to. And then on the loading side of trains, you really just need the small container, because it's only going to get used for the roughly 30 seconds when it's in its docking animation. You just need to be able to hold 30 seconds worth of material, and then you just need to be using a faster speed belt here so that it can make up the difference. Each freight platform is dealing with 600, and so having a Mark 6 and it being able to do the 1200 will easily be able to make up for that pause of 30 seconds. I think the only pure one is actually this one down here. So there's 1 pure. Let's see, and then we have the equivalent of, let's see, 1 more, 2 more, 3 more. So that's 4 pure nodes. And then adding these 2 brings me up to a total of 6. But unfortunately, I need a total of 8. That's right, I need 9,600 copper ore. My map doesn't show all of it, so here is a snapshot from Satisfactory Calculator. The interactive map is fantastic, but here are all of the copper nodes. So as you can see, I've kind of grabbed most of the close ones. So there's 1 more pure node that's not too far away. But I need 2 more, so no matter what, I kind of have to go a ways to go get some more copper. So if I have to go a fair distance, let's do things a little bit different. Back to the in-game map. I am all the way over here, so I think this is the Titan Forest, which is one of those areas that, I don't know, it's kind of a love-hate thing, I'll be honest. So I'm riding around this little patch of water here. These trees are awesome. I love the way that they look. Exploring through here, I think, is a lot of fun. I like to build big factories, and so building in this area is quite the challenge. And I'm just not good enough at working with the terrain to be able to come up with something. So I tend not to build much in this area. But this little clearing right here, with just right on top of the lake, I think will give me just enough space to do what I want. I've got 2 pure copper nodes right here, and then if we follow these belts just around the corner here, I've got 2 pure iron nodes. They're pretty close together, so I just needed to belt those over to here. And this right here is going to be the spot of a mini little factory. And I went ahead and just made a really simple blueprint right here. So let me show you how this is going to work. Give it just enough space. I'm going to fill in the gaps, however much bigger I need to make this, but I wanted to keep the blueprint itself basically as kind of compact and small as possible. Actually, I think I wanted that one on this side. I made two different versions, and really the difference is just where the splitters are, because I just like the symmetry. But I forgot to color these ones. Whoops. So just like in the other blueprint, these are going to be overclocked to 200%, so they're going to create 200 copper ingots, 3 of them paired together going into one constructor. That'll take the 600 and produce 100 copper powder. Each set of 3 will use 300 of iron and copper each, so this right here will use 600. And then if I stack them, this right here will use 1 full Mark 6 belt of each one. And this right here is all I need to turn 2400 iron and copper into 800 copper powder. So the belt work for these is going to be pretty easy. I may actually want to push this back just a little bit, but basically just going to stack these here, combine these two, and then I just need one more. Yeah, I probably need to push this back just a little bit. Because then I'll have one more set of splitters, and then half of it goes here, half of it feeds this floor. And then just do the same thing for these 2 floors. Let me knock that out of the way, and I'll show you what this thing looks like. I was right. Just needed one more foundation, and had plenty of room now. So like I said, 1 belt of each gets plugged in, and then half of it goes upstairs, half of it stays here. And then I've got some ramps that take me up between floors. And then we've just basically got the same setup over and over again, all the way to the top. But then you get to the top, and we've got a drone port. So the one fantastic thing about copper powder is the fact that it stacks to 500. So even though the 6-to-1 ratio of ingots to copper powder is a pain, this is where it works to your benefit. I'm going to be making 800 copper powder per minute, but as it turns out, that's only 1.6. Yeah, 1.6 stacks per minute. And so even though the factory is pretty far away, this shouldn't have any issue. And even if it did, I could just add one more drone and then it for sure wouldn't have any problem. The swamp really isn't too far, so I was able to just run a power tower right to the edge of the swamp and then just create another connection right at the edge of my train station. So I've got a smart splitter. The priority is going to be to fill up the drone port, and then once that fills up, we're just going to have the sink go. So I think it'll be easier just to get this whole thing up and running, and then when I go to turn on the whole factory, I just need to have the drone come over and pick this stuff up. So let's come on down here and flip the switch. And just like that, we have all white lights. Gotta love overclock and everything. And it looks like, yeah, that looks about 2/3 full. So this will be full in a matter of no time, and then we'll start sinking it, and that'll be 800 copper powder done and ready to send to the factory. And with this little outpost taken care of, I think I have all of the raw resources handled. On the complete opposite side of the factory, I went ahead and added another train station. Good old Pasta Town in the Rocky Desert. And if we come right out here, we can see it connect to the normal train line. This is one of the hidden benefits that I kind of built into this design, but I haven't had to use until now. So if I were to stack this a second time, train passes underneath, no problem. If I grab a locomotive, we can also see that this one will also pass right under here with no problem. So the nice thing with these being as tall as they are is I'm able to snake through a line onto the other side. Since my personal line is always the outside one, this was the best thing I could come up with. So this way, from either direction, I can head on over to here, and then from here, I could leave and go to either side. And if I decided to expand it, it won't interfere with anything. And with this train line, I can now run power throughout the factory, although I'll probably use a priority power switch just to keep it on its own power grid, just in case. I know this will save me some headache in the future, so I just went ahead and used some display signs and added just the basic information, what material and the amount. And I did that for all of the buses that are coming in. Alright, so we're getting close. So all I should really have to do is build my drone ports and then get everything sent in, do some belt work. This will be nice and short. Yeah, well, it wouldn't be a late game factory without going over some major screw up that I made. So let's take a look at it. The fused modular frames, thankfully, I calculated that right. I have enough. The radio control units. Honestly, no idea what I was thinking. So my best guess is I thought that pressure conversion cubes were a 1-to-1 and not 2 radio control units for every fused modular frame. So I realized I am short radio control units. But the funny thing is not only am I not making enough, I forgot to add in a whole nother space elevator part in the future. So I'm really not making enough. So let's head back to the Grassy Fields because I do have some extras. So let's see what we can work with. I'm still really happy with the way the electronics factory is turning out. Except for one part. This. 98%. We just can't have that. Instead, I'm going to spend hours trying to figure out how I can get this to 100%. The only reason I'm making these are for 2 of the space elevator parts. And if those ran slightly less efficient, it would not be the end of the world. Except for it's always going to drive me nuts that I didn't get this thing at 100%. So if we look here, well, this shows 100. Oh, this one's 99. And I'm thinking it's probably the nitrogen because I sure have a whole lot of everything else. 98. Yep. And I bet you, yep, there it is, 97. So it is the nitrogen. All right, let's take a look at the drones. And this is where I really hate building super compact. Troubleshooting this is, I'm not gonna lie, kind of a nightmare. So I spent a little while trying to figure out where exactly the issue is, and honestly, I can't figure it out. So, just gonna redo this whole system. Oh boy. Okay, so I do not want to talk about how long this took. So let's just go through it. As you can see, a little bit different on the outside. I don't have 3 different belts. I only have 1. And if we come inside, it is a whole lot cleaner. As the drones come in and drop off their payload. And then it comes down here because really, I just couldn't fit what I needed to do right there. So we've still got this. This was still fine. The 5-way split to get the canisters going to the right spots. There's no issue with that at all. That works just fine. So if we come through here, I added on all this to do the real load balancing. Back to the basics. So all the brand new containers of the packaged nitrogen come into here. And we've got a nice stockpile of the packaged nitrogen right here. And then it goes into all this load balancing. So this was actually the first version that I tried. It was just so nice and simple. It was beautiful. I just had to swap out the small container for the larger one, and it was perfect. Except for the reason it was so simple was because I did the math wrong. And this is load balance for 650. This here is load balance for 625. Well, up to this point, it's 625. So the issue was I needed 312.5. And the reason why I did them individually is I just thought that would be an easier way to do it. So we just multiplied by 2, and now we can work with a nice whole number. So that was the goal. I need to get to 625, and then I split it in half, and that's the amount of packaged nitrogen that I need to send up to the 4 packagers. And then they just get split the 4 ways. Everything else in there is really simple. So I know this looks pretty crazy, but let me run you through it. It's really not too bad. So we start with the Mark V, and then that goes into a splitter. We've got a Mark III and a Mark V. So it's trying to split it in half, but since the Mark III is less than the 390, that'll keep that one completely full. So I've got 270 here and 510 on this belt. And then from here, I'm going to split it all 3 ways. So I've got 90, 90, and 90. So that was 510 plus 90. So here's 600. This 90 is going on to the merger belt that's going back. This 90 is what we're going to continue to work with. So we're going to split this one 30, 30, and 30. And then with this 30, we're going to split it 3 ways. So here's 10, and here's 10. So now we've got 620 on here. And then with this 10, we split this in half. Here's 5 and here's 5. So here we have our 625. We split that in half. And there's the 312.5. See? Not too bad, right? And there we go. Now we're working with 100%. And it doesn't look like we're just slowly losing any containers anymore like we were. Took a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm really happy I fixed it before I started actually relying on these parts. Alright, I'm finally done sidetracking myself, so let's take a look. This is what I have to work with, although I don't have all of it. Like I said, for the 25 supercomputers, I've already allocated those for something. Thankfully, I don't need those here. But like the crystal oscillators, don't actually have 80 available, because I'm counting on using 50 of those for a future project. The circuit boards, I have about 30 left over. So I'm definitely not going to be using the same recipe as these ones to create the initial batch of radio control units. So working with what I have available up here, along with the things in, we'll just call it the basement, I'm sinking a whole bunch of extra ingots and silica and all that sort of stuff. So here is the plan. This is what I came up with. This requires me to bring in almost nothing. So thankfully, if you run down the line, I've got crystal oscillators. I have enough of those. Rubber, get this, I have 560 available. So thankfully, I only need 540. But it gets even better than that. For the copper, I have exactly 1,050 extra copper laying around. Feels good. I definitely have this much silica, so the only thing I really need to bring in is all that extra aluminum. Thankfully, I've already processed all the bauxite in the world, and I have extra aluminum laying around. So I just need to rearrange my trains a little bit and get that sent down. As I was waiting for this to balance out after I was done playing around with the load balancing of the packaged nitrogen, I went ahead and laid down all the sealing. Let's go ahead and go upstairs, and I'll show you how I'm going to lay this out. And here we have the third floor. So I have it split in half, mainly just to kind of give myself a reference point, and I could get this kind of centered on this half. I think I only need half of it for the other side. That'll be the superposition oscillators, but that is way down the line. So I gave myself a little platform again because I really like the way that it looked downstairs, and since I'm going to have a few more of those machines, and it's that same kind of layout where I don't need a ton of machines, so I don't need to use my huge blueprints. So let's just manually place these. Let's go old school here for a little bit. I use so many blueprints anyways. So let's start at the back and work our way forwards. So with manufacturers, I'm going to go ahead and let them just take up 3 foundations because that should space things out pretty nicely. So with some overclocking, I think I need just enough to fill up this whole row. There we go. Now they're spaced out correctly. I haven't used this recipe, so it's still in my library. I'm going to be using the radio control systems. These are all going to be overclocked to 200%. Each one will produce 9. It's pretty nice. And I can just copy and paste these all the way across. Alright, so let's take a look at the inputs. Crystal oscillators, that'll get load balanced across all of these, and I already have those just right down below. Circuit boards, I've only got 30 available, so I'm going to need a whole bunch more, about 150 more. The aluminum casings, I'm also going to have to make those. The rubber is down in the basement, and then that'll get load balanced across all of them. So really, I just need machines for these 2 processes. And for most of those machines, I just need some assemblers. So what I'm going to do is these first set, I'm going to line up with the very outside ones. So that's going to go there, and then this one will go on the outside of this one here. And these ones are going to be doing our outclad casings. Each one is clocked to 180, because that's what each manufacturer needs, and we're just going to direct feed all of these. Alright, so for the next set of assemblers, these ones are going to be the ones that go on the opposite ones. These ones will go right on the inside. These ones will be using the silicon circuit board. And then these ones are also going to be overclocked to 200%, so each one produces 25, and it's going to work out because, like I said, each one of these machines needs 30, but I really like symmetry. So just trust me, I'm going to make it work. And as far as the inputs go, the silica I'm going to be able to load balance across all 6 machines. The copper sheets, however, I don't have. And so for that, I need some refineries. So what I want to do is line this up so that this can basically just run in a straight line. So it'll probably end up being something like this. And then I'll load balance the two silica lines together. And then I can load balance the three groups of two. So this is going to get lined up somewhere down here. And then that way I can line up the output just straight into that one. But as I'm looking at it, I don't think that's quite enough space because I'm going to want a walkway eventually. And this is going to make this bit a bit cramped and then leave a ton of extra space back there. So I think I'm probably just going to move it one whole section back. And as you can see, most of the load balancing is going to be pretty simple because I'm working with sets of 6 machines. So let me just fast forward a bit and let me show you what I come up with. The refineries needed more space. I think this is much better. So I've got a spot to plug up some water. Thankfully, I don't need too much. I only need 330. And I'm still missing the load balancing for these. Guess I still need to add that, but it's going to be pretty easy doing that part. But the outputs will just come right along here and head up right into the assemblers. So like I mentioned, I just have a splitter to load balance the silica, and then those 3 lines come to here. And this is where the initial 330 silica will get plugged in just right underneath. So nice easy load balancing for that so far. But as I mentioned, each one of these are only going to be outputting 25, and these manufacturers need 30 each per minute. And this is where the 30 from down below are getting inserted. So they get plugged in right here. So that then gets split into thirds. So that would be 10, 10, and 10. And then that 10 then gets split in half. So here's 5 and here's 5. And I just do that on all 3 sides. And that's how I added the extra 5 to each line. Moving on to the aluminum. So I thought this was a fun way to do it. And if you have the logistics floor underneath and a ton of extra space, take up a ton of room, you don't need to go vertically, and you don't need to clip things. It just takes up a dumb amount of space. But I had a lot of space, and I think it looks cool. So this is where the copper gets plugged in, and this is going to be the aluminum. So this looks great, but the real load balancing will just have to be done down below. These all need 240 aluminum ingots, so I can't bring in just one belt. It's going to need 2. But I'll show that off when I get to it. And here's the last bit of load balancing. So it looks kind of crazy, but it's all just really simple. Since everything else is laying flat, I was able to do the rest of the load balancing just 1 level higher of splitters. So just stack 2 of them, delete the bottom one, and that's basically the height that I'm working at. And then I just used old stubby here to get things plugged in. Doing 6 machines is real simple. Just got to split it 3 ways, and then each one of those gets split in half. And there you have it. I'll just need the crystal oscillators and the rubber to plug into each one of those. So now there's just a little bit of load balancing to do underneath there, but for the most part, I need to bring up a whole bunch of items up here. So what I'm thinking is I'm probably just going to use this spot next to the stairs, and I'll just do something kind of similar. So I'll just have some concrete pillars just right next to here, and I'll probably zoop these up. And I'll probably even use the sides to either one of these pipes. I already kind of started to lay out where the pipe would go for the water. But the bulk of it is belts. And those are a lot more flexible. So I'm going to squeeze the pipe in there. Probably even be able to squeeze in a belt on either side. And then there'll be a few more belts. And then it'll just come up here. And that way I can basically use this spot underneath here. And then I still have more space that I can kind of use to do any more of the load balancing and kind of go find those items, since the rubber and the copper and the silica are all down there sinking right now. Now the belts are in and the items are flowing. You guessed it, right into sinks. So it was the easiest way I could think of to bring together this many items, because it's going to be too hard to just kind of do the old flip the switch and get it all running like I usually do, since this is using so many pieces from the existing factory and kind of leftovers down below. I just figured bring it all up here, throw some really ugly clipping and some sinks going on, and we're just going to delete it as quick as we can. Because that is the quickest way for me to delete something, is just horribly clip stuff into it. Because I really hate the way that looks. But let's go through the load balancing real quickly. So that one copper line is just going to come over here, and the 330 will then get split between the 6 refineries. Now let's take a look under the hood for the rest of this. It's not too bad. So for the aluminum, this was the best thing I could think of. So if we come over here, I've got them labeled. I've got 2 lines of 720 aluminum ingots coming in. Those come right over here. And then this is a 2 to 3 load balancer. So I can take those 2 720 lines and turn it into 3 480 lines. So the top 2 just go to the 2 inside pairs. And then the last third then goes into this splitter. And so one of them goes to that end, and then the other one goes all the way to that end. And then with the copper, I'm doing the same thing. It's just coming in kind of on the other side. So it's coming around here and then plugging in from this side. So the close 2 pairs are each getting these thirds. And then the last third gets split again because of the very end ones. And that's how I'm dealing with that weird design that I made. And then everything else just kind of gets plugged in where it's supposed to. So pretty easy actually down here. Alright, to get this started, it is definitely going to go in a few different stages. So to kick this off, and we can start the timer, we're going to go ahead and start with the slowest things because that's actually what we're probably going to wait on longest. And then from there, let's go ahead and get the copper sent in so we can get the copper sheets going. Now that the copper sheet's remade, let's send in the silica. And now the circuit boards from downstairs are showing up. So now these belts will have the amount that they need. And the crystal oscillators are now showing up for the manufacturers. And that's kind of what I was waiting for because everything else will show up pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and send the rest on in. There they are. The missing radio control units. Oh boy. So load balancing the outputs was really pretty simple. Since these output 9 apiece, I grouped these up. So here's 18, here's 18. So that would be 36. And then this one, I just got the missing 4 from. So if we take the 9, split it 3 ways, 3, 3, and 3. Split the middle one all 3 ways. So here's 1 plus the 3. There's my 4. Add the other 2 with this 3. And there's the 5. Group that up with that 9. And here's the remaining 14 that I have that I'll need for a future project. But for today's project, I just need these 40. So if you have almost all of the pieces ready and right next to the factory, it won't even take 10 minutes to start up. I went ahead and let this run for a little while so that I can make sure that everything's staying on at 100%. And it looks like we can count on an extra 54 radio control units. Not too shabby. And for now, I'm probably just going to leave it like this. We're just going to continue to sync them, but eventually I'll branch off that 40, probably send them down below and then have them come out the side or something. And then eventually they'll come to one of these drone ports here on the front. Right up here. The nice thing with setting it up as basically an open drone port is kind of how I refer to them as. I'm going to have resources in here, but there won't be a drone associated to this drone port. Instead, I'm going to have it associated to the one at the other side, at the Rocky Desert factory, and then that one will be the one that has fuel. And so I don't need to worry about dragging the fuel from the side of the factory all the way over here. These ones shouldn't even need it. Back to the Rocky Desert. So with the radio control units finally out of the way, I have all the pieces to the puzzle. So what I'm going to do next is basically add a hallway. Because I'm not going to completely encase this whole thing. I've got more to add to this factory, but I want to add a little bit more to it. So I'm going to have a hallway that kind of goes around this inside area. Basically, this set of the foundations I'm going to cover up. And then I'm also just going to go ahead and put like an inside wall. And then I'm going to figure out some way to do the drones. And so I'm thinking I'm going to do a circle here in the center because those are just fun. And I don't normally build in circles because, to be honest, they're kind of a pain. There are a number of different ways to make circles. Let me show you the one that I'm going to use. So this right here is the very center of this whole factory. So I have a foundation here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and place one, and then in Zoop, I'm going to zoop out 10 more foundations in all 4 directions. Once I have those in place, I'm going to go ahead and delete all but one side. And this is just because I think this is an easy way to kind of keep my reference. And so now, holding control, I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel 1 click, and I'm going to go ahead and place 1 foundation, and then do the same thing over again. I'm going to go ahead and zoop out 10 foundations in all 4 directions. And then again, just delete these bottom 4. And I'm just going to rinse and repeat until I go all the way around. And it's going to be quite a few foundations, and I'm going to delete the large majority of them because I really only want the ones at the very end. But by doing it at this distance here, they overlap a little bit, but it's not too bad. And I'll be able to delete these. And I'll have just a nice ring that'll go all the way around. And that should give me a good amount of work to do a little bit of load balancing, and on the top of it, place my drone ports. So let me get to work, and I'll show you what it looks like. I've got a big old circle now. Pretty neat. So if we come up to the top, I've got my drone ports. And I added my hallways and some walls. And yeah, I've been a little bit busy. Got a floor down here and everything. So let me show you. So this is a real simple blueprint, just a 6x6 concrete. And then I went with more patterns again because I thought it was fun. So this one right here, I'm using the cross dotted line is the pattern I'm using on all of the foundations. And then that way I could still use the asphalt because I really like how smooth they are and the kind of the transition from one foundation to the next. But sometimes it's really hard because you just don't have any grid. You just have the whole foundation to deal with. So when it does come time to place some machines down here, hopefully this will make it a little bit easier on me. Alright, for the walkway, as you can guess, I just made a giant blueprint. So let me just place one down here. Be a little bit easier to see. And that's the blueprint. Pretty simple. So this is built so it'll just snap right onto... Actually, if I delete one, probably also make it easier. So this was the existing blueprint, and then this one just snaps on right next to it. So that way when you're in the hallway, you still get to look down on the belts a little bit. I just really like being just slightly elevated above the belts. I just think it gives you a better view of everything that's going on. So that's why I wanted these to be just 1 foundation higher. And so I've just got a normal wall on this side, and then it's just concrete foundations right there. And then on the inside, I'm using the coated concrete and just the walkway patterns again. This is using the carbon steel paint finish. This one's using the copper. And then the very middle ones I decided to make glass. And then yeah, just place those all the way around. And I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. And then of course I made these walls too. But these ones are super simple. It's just mostly normal concrete with a stripe of 2 foundations worth of the coated concrete running down the middle. And this right here is one of the reasons why I set this up like this. I just thought this would be really cool. The fused modular frames and the radio control units are both coming by drones, and those need to be load balanced across all 40 machines. So the easiest way to do that is first to split it into 4 groups of 10, and then from there, I'll split it in half and then do a 5-way split and a 5-way split. And I'll show you that in a second. And I still have to do the load balancing for those, but I need 20 of one and 40 of the other, so the load balancing is about as easy as it gets. Those are going to come down through here, and in here is where I'll do a little bit more of the load balancing. This is where I'm going to have to do the 4-way split for both of those. And I'm going to have to do a few more things as well down here. So this was basically just to kind of signify the middle, so I'm going to redo this. But I'm going to be able to use this part in here. So I've got a huge amount of area that I'm just going to use for some extra of the load balancing and whatnot. And it gives me a spot to run some cables and all that fun stuff. And then that way I'll have a small march of both radio control units and the fused modular frames that will come into each quarter. So those will come through here and then just run underneath the floor and then plug up right through here. And like I mentioned, we're just going to split it in half as soon as it gets here. So it goes off into here, and then it has 5 assemblers to split to. So it's just doing a normal 5-way split. So the initial amount gets plugged into a merger, that gets plugged into a splitter, that gets split off. This half goes over here and feeds 3 assemblers. This half goes over here, it feeds 2 assemblers, and then the third piece gets cycled back into the merger. And then I just need to copy that for all 4 sides. Alright, so now I need to basically do the finishing touches. So for the load balancing on the copper and the iron side, it's really pretty simple. Because each set of 3 foundries needs 300, I basically just need to group up 2 of these, and that's 600. And 4 groups in total equal 1 full Mark 6 belt of both iron and copper. Pretty easy. I love it. And then it'll basically be taking a belt from here, I'll bring it up to the ceiling and then run it to where it needs to plug in for each one of those systems, since I do need to plug in a few, but not all of them. Once I kind of figure out where the ones that are going to need belts are going to go, the rest of them I'm going to be able to delete both the foundries and the constructors, and then I'll be load balancing the copper powder that's coming in from the drones. One set of copper powder is coming from the northern forest, and then another set of copper powder is coming from the grassy fields. So I'll actually be able to delete a whole bunch of these foundries and constructors. But again, the load balancing will be super easy for that. So the next major thing for me is going to be finishing all these buses. I've put off the busy work for a while, but now I need to lay down these extra 1 meter walls. And the great thing about having the 1 meter wall run along the side is I'm going to be able to take my wall outlets and I can pretty easily run them just right along one of the sides, and they're really out of the way unless you know where to look. Most of the cable itself will be hidden in the concrete, and then you'll just have one of these wall connections every once in a while, but that'll be a really easy way for me to run the power all the way out to the miners. So I just have that last bit of load balancing, and I'm sure probably a few other odds and ends, but the next thing we'll be able to do is take a tour and watch this thing come to life. And cross my fingers that I have enough power. And the factory is ready. So before I take you on the short tour, let's go over to the drone ports and actually get them started. Alright, so I just need to set all of these real quickly. So this one is going to grab the fuel for all of them. I'll just alternate my drones. So I think I sent my first one to Rocket Fuel 1. We'll go to Rocket Fuel 2. Really shouldn't matter. These things are going to grab fuel so infrequently, and they're never really going to have an issue. I do need to give it some fuel to start, although I think I can grab the rest of it. It'll be able to refuel at the other drone port. Now I just need to grab priority power switch because it is downstairs by my train station, and I just need to turn on Rocky Desert. Now the way I have this set up is if we go downstairs at the very bottom, kind of hidden, I just have a regular normal switch. So the rest of the factory is actually behind this switch. What I just turned on went directly to the drone ports, and that's the only part of the factory that I've turned on, is just up here. So that one is going to go get the fuel, and then that way they can start running, and then right in here they're going to just go to some smart sinks. These belts definitely don't need to be Mark 6. These belts only needed to be Mark 1, but I figured this area right here is hidden, so I could speed up the startup process by a little bit, but I'll go through that in a second. Let's finish the drones real quickly. Grab my extra and let's set up the rest. This one is fuse modular frames in, so I just need to connect this to the fuse modular frames out. There we go. I don't know why it didn't let me select it at first, but once that gets fuel, it'll start going. And thankfully, if you hover over the name, it'll give you the full name, so I can make sure I select the right one, whether it's A or B. Alright, so the drones are set up, and those will get up and running as soon as the first one comes back with some fuel. I am pretty positive that the drones will have no problem with the throughput, but this way we can just make sure before I actually start everything. But to get everything started, once they are up and running, I'm just going to come down here and delete these sinks. The copper powder is going to come in at such a much higher rate that I want to turn those on separately. This way I can come over here and just delete the one that's dealing with the fuse modular frames and the radio control units, get those sent into the factory. It'll probably take like 15 minutes, and then I can get all of the copper, iron, and just the pure copper powder sent into the rest of the factory. So for this side and the opposing side, it's just the 2 belts, and then on these sides there's the 3. So there will be a third one for the copper powder. That'll get sent on over here. And then we have the rest of the load balancing. For most of these setups, I had pure nodes. Well, for all of the iron, I dealt with pure nodes. For the copper, I had 2 normal nodes, and so instead of combining them and then resplitting them up, I just have this one plugged into these two, and then same thing on this side. But for the rest of these, it's one full Mark 6 belt of each, and then they get load balanced across 4 different setups. And that goes all the way around. If we go down underneath, pretty much just use the ceiling to run most of the belt work around. Made it easy, and then that way I didn't have to have extra platforms everywhere. And there's plenty of space. For the line of copper powder, that just comes up here, and then heads on over to these sections that look just so much more empty. I was able to delete the foundries and the constructors, and so one line of 800 copper powder just gets load balanced across the 8 different particle accelerators. So I put all of these on basically the far corner of the map. So if you're on the inside, when you're looking in, you'll probably be able to see much more of the belts moving around. For the final product, I merged up 2 of the particle accelerators, and then those are just going straight up to the ceiling. So I went ahead and added this foundation right here so that I could group up all of these. So 5 sets of 2 get grouped up, and since each particle accelerator is only putting out 0.5 per minute, this belt will have 5, that belt will have 5, that one, and then the very far one. So all of these will get grouped up together in the very center. Merge up 2 of them, and 2 of them, and then those 2, and those come right up here into a smart splitter. So the priority will be this storage container because I need 1,000 of them to complete phase 5. And then once that fills up, we'll go ahead and start sending them into the sink. I need 1,000, and I'm going to be making 20 a minute, less than an hour, and I'll have this knocked out. That's pretty awesome. The belt buses are all done, and I was able to run power out to all of my miners. Although I'm not going to turn this on with the rest of the factory because I just don't need the quartz or the sand quite yet. I'm just going to leave them powered off. This is what the cave turned out to look like. So I just went with fences and some coated concrete. They just all come together right here in the middle and then just head on upstairs. The last thing I did to help the startup process was to power on this little outpost for a little bit. Easiest way is just delete a section of the train, so now this is disconnected from the rest of everything else. Now if I look at the train station, I can see it's got no power. Now we're at a max consumption of 772. So a really cool trick if you have the extra Somers loops, which I do. One of these will only provide 550, I believe, but if I place down 2 of them, I now have 1,200. So I just used that to power this on for a few minutes, and that way I could build up basically 1 full load in the train, and that way when I flip the switch to turn on everything, I don't have to wait extra long for this train to basically get up to 100%. I could just cheat and instantly have full efficiency. I just need to reconnect my train track here. I believe that about does it for the tour, so let's go take a look at the progress of the drones. I think it's about that time we get this party started. I wanted to wait till it had just a little bit built up so that it can basically start right away, and hopefully the 5-way split will have is warmed up, for lack of a better word. It takes a couple cycles for it to get up to 100% efficiency, and so I didn't want these machines to have to start and stop because the copper powder is going to get up to 100% really fast. But there should be enough built up now that we can go ahead and get everything else turned on. Okay. So the non-drone switch. And I can also go ahead and send in just the straight up copper powder and watch it all come to life. And the first few have made it into the storage container. Ah, this is beautiful. It's looking like they're all on at 100%, but I do want to make sure. So I'm going to let it run for a bit. I've got some more tinkering with something else to do in the meantime, and we'll check back in. So I'm real curious what this sink is going to look like in about an hour. You gotta love that nice, steady flow of nuclear pasta. The factory is staying on at 100%. Let's come up here and take a look. If you've made it this far, you're probably just as curious as I am about two things. How much am I sinking right now? And how is my power looking? Well, I can tell you before we even look, one is exciting and one is not. Let's go with the good news. Oh yeah, look at that. Definitely has some peaks and valleys. So it looks like our low is about 16 and a half and the high is 22, almost 23. These right here are making up about half my points right now, I think. These generate a lot of sync points. And even though I'm making 20 a minute, the cycle time for the particle accelerators is 2 minutes. So really, I'm making them in batches of 40 every 2 minutes. Now, the belt distance is really long. They do get grouped up in a somewhat regular fashion, but I think that's really what's causing the sync value to kind of fluctuate so much. In some periods, I'm getting way more, and then the others is the lull in between the cycle times. Or something's horribly wrong and I can't figure it out. One of the two. And now for the not so great news. Yeah, it's gotten a little bit closer. So I'm producing just under 200 gigawatts, and it looks like my max consumption is peaking at like 187. So that's not great. It's a good thing I've almost tripled my battery storage so far. I'm pretty glad I did that. That is a problem for future Moo. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. The next project is, well, it's going to be future Moo's time to figure out that power, and then building on the next stage of this factory. I am pretty excited about. I'm finally going to mass produce a new item. I'm going to be turning all 20 of these nuclear pasta into 200 singularity cells. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.